Hello and welcome to Foreign and Domestic Unfiltered Podcast. I'm your host, Ramon Mial, and folks, we've got one hell of an episode today. Now, I know the political analysis can feel tedious sometimes. I realize not everyone is a political wonk like I am, but I've got some really choice content today it's guaranteed to bring a little bit of comic relief at the very least, but it still gives us a wealth of insight into the minds of the Democratic Party establishment as we approach the kickoff for the campaigns of the 2026 midterms and some really important general elections in November as well. So for today, we're going to revise the reading series with a New York Times article that pairs very nicely with the Hunter Biden interview with Andrew Callahan from Channel 5 News. All right, so let's jump right into it. I think it makes sense too. I think it makes sense to start off with the Hunter Biden interview because it flows very nicely into the Times article. Hunter's interview actually, it gives us like a little peek into the insight of the minds of the exact cohort of people that the article writes about, which are also the same people that Hunter spends much of the time in the interview absolutely dunking on, and it's glorious. All right, let's hop right into it.
I think it was Don Jr.
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about old White House.
Yeah, when my dad was there.
Oh, so they just got to blame you automatically.
Yeah, I mean, they're literally going to do an FBI, another congressional investigation, because they've convinced themselves that it had to be me, that there was a little tiny. And I guess my point of even bringing it up is that no. I have been clean and sober since June of 2019, and I have not touched a drop of alcohol or a drug, and I'm incredibly, incredibly proud of that.
And why would you bring cocaine to the White House?
Why would I bring cocaine to the White House, stick it into a cubby outside the Situation Room in the West Wing when I wasn't there? Anyway, who the fuck knows?
And politicians, I mean, they do blow, right?
I testified before the House Oversight, Judiciary, and Ways and Means Committee. It was a whole big family shindig on the Republican side. All of them showed up, from Marjorie Taylor Greene to Lauren Boebert to Matt Gaetz to, they're all sitting there. Now, none of them had the guts, except for a couple at the very end, to ask me any questions. At one point, in the 7 hours that I was being deposed, in which, by the way, I demanded that they do it in public, and they refused, and the reason is because they're fucking morons. Matt Gaetz, of all people, was giving me shit about my drug use. I said, really? All the people at this table, you're going to talk to me about my addiction, my alcoholism? And I said, how many of you have had your own experience with alcoholism and addiction? Because I knew at least 4 or 5 people in that room on the Republican side that were in recovery. And I knew of 3 that have been accused credibly of being drug users. And I knew that every single one of them had somebody in their family that was absolutely facing a serious drug problem.
That's a really great point that he makes right there, just to pause real quick, because Matt Gaetz at the time, like, don't forget, when all this Hunter Biden investigation was going on, like, this was right before all that stuff broke around Matt Gaetz, like, all the clips that Andrew just showed there. Like, we covered it on this show, right? And the funny thing is, like, me and Patter, we knew, well, like, we'd seen all of the, like, non-legacy media coverage. There was a bunch of stuff on, excuse me, like the Daily Beast. I'm trying to forget some of the other publications, some of the resources that we used, but like there was chatter. There was for sure like definitive chatter on the Hill that like, hey, this guy Matt Gaetz is like fucking out of his mind. I forget the one story. There was one story where he basically like he was on like some committee, and he was basically in the committee showing fellow Congress people like lewd photos of women he'd been with, like talking about like basically just on some complete frat bro shit. Talking about like, oh yeah, I did this crazy thing last night with these ladies and blah blah blah, and talking about drugs and all this shit. And it's like, dude, you were doing all of that at the same time that you were trying to get so high and mighty talking about this guy. And you know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, I mean, you'll see it, right? We're gonna cover it more. Or not cover it more, but we'll play a lot more of this and you'll get more context. This isn't like me defending Hunter Biden, right? It's not about that. It's just about, the hypocrisy of it all in general, where it's always right wingers. Like, they're always out there like, you're this, you're that, oh, I have this moral high ground, blah, blah, blah. And then literally like 6 months, 2 years later, it turns out they were doing that exact shit that they were trying to hang other people for. Right. So unbelievable.
I think there might be a lack of understanding there because they think that cocaine is fundamentally different from crack cocaine.
I don't know what they know. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Well, because they think cocaine, Scarface, very cool.
Yeah.
Crack cocaine, they think The Wire.
oh, in that sense, oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like, they don't know how
absolutely. Yeah.
similar the chemical compounds are.
Well, the only difference between crack cocaine and cocaine is sodium bicarbonate and water and heat. Literally,
That's it?
That's it.
And those things are pretty much free if you go to like a science store.
This is free. You can go to your neighborhood convenience store and just get. Anyway, I don't want to tell people how to make crack cocaine, but it literally is a mayonnaise jar of cocaine and baking soda.
How different is the experience?
Oh, it's vastly different. And like for real, I feel really reluctant to kind of have some euphoric discussion. I know you're not asking me to do that, but have some euphoric discussion about crack cocaine.
I think this might be kind of the opposite here.
Okay, no, it's the exact opposite. I'm saying I don't want to have the experience of some euphoric recall. That's how powerful crack cocaine is. Does crack cocaine make you act any differently? No. Is it safer than alcohol? Probably.
I mean, I just this is probably like I couldn't believe it. So this was like pretty far into the interview, but it's just like the take of like crack cocaine isn't as dangerous as alcohol is pretty fucking it's a magma hot take. I mean, I don't even know. Hey, I've never smoked crack. So what do I know? Right? I mean, this guy, he would know, but I'm just saying, like, on its face, that's really tough to just take as given. You know what I mean? I don't know about that. I don't know about that.
People think of crack as being dirty. It's the exact opposite. When you make crack, what you're doing is you're burning off all the impurities so that it combines with the sodium bicarbonate, which makes it smokable. That's all. All of these actors and, people in the past that talked about they had a problem with cocaine and freebasing. They were smoking crack.
So straw on the stove is the same thing.
Not exactly, but close to it. But it's a little bit different. But anyway, my point about it, your point about it, which I think is true, is that there's a thing about crack that is really insidious. And what it is that anytime, I think one of the reasons that they believe that smoking cigarettes is so addictive is because it combines three really important things. It's habit forming, there's an oral fixation, and there is a ritual combined with it. And so the idea of hand to mouth is a habit and a fixation that we learn very early, even as children. With a pacifier, with a spoon, with your thumb, to breastfeeding. Okay, so I don't want to get into the psychology of it because I'm no expert, but I do know this, is that you combine with that ignition, combustion, and then you combine the ritual. You have your cigarette in the morning, you have your cigarette when you get out of the car, you have your cigarette with your coffee. Crack is that on steroids. It's over and over. There's ritual to it. There's a ritualized part of it. The combination of all of those addictive behaviors together becomes like really powerful. And the drug in and of itself is a more immediate euphoric sensation and connected to it than, in my experience, cocaine alone.
Does it require more frequency to maintain the high?
Yes. And the capacity to use more than you could otherwise with powder cocaine, just physically to be able to ingest it.
So you're kind of saying that cocaine reaches a certain plateau of euphoria where you can't necessarily get any higher?
In my experience, yes. This is like a PSA. If you want to completely, utterly fuck up your life, I don't think that anything is necessarily, you do it once, you're addicted. But there's about the closest thing that statement could be true would be with crack cocaine.
All right, so the main reason why I put this first part in was obviously there's a couple of funny, it's kind of like it's tone setting for like the rest of the interview, but two specific reasons for this first clip of the interview. Just on its face, like look at how I just want to point out, like, Andrew Callahan's a great documentarian. Look at while they're hitting all these different camera shots with Hunter, And you know, like this is like a kind of a deeply personal conversation for him, right? He's 6 years sober. I think he mentions it somewhere later in the interview if it didn't catch it in that first part. But you know, like this is a very introspective thing, even though there's like some wacky stuff, like, you know, some of his opinions on what's more addictive, what's more dangerous, whatever. But like just the his style of how he does his documentaries, like it's so good. I really like it. And obviously I think it's really popular. This video probably has like, I don't know, probably somewhere close to 4 or 5 million views right now. I think when my coworker had sent it to me, it had like 750,000 views in like the first 9 hours. So there's a reason that he has this following. It's not just like, you know, he doesn't really get like these. I would consider this like a pretty, like it's not like a huge get for a person to get for an interview. Like, you know, like the fucking Nelk boys had Bibi Netanyahu on a couple weeks ago. Like, it's not like he's like a world leader or anything, but you know, he's a pretty well-known person that he finds this special way to kind of like take this guy that no one in public life like really cared about anymore, and certainly like regular people weren't even thinking about anymore outside of the laptop controversy. But just really, really unique touch here. It kind of reminds me of the Tiger King documentaries, like his style, because it's like so raw and natural that I don't know, it's super appealing to me. But the second reason why I highlighted this part was just, again, like I said before, the tone setting of it. Look at Hunter's face while he's talking about all this, right? Like at the end there where it's just it's something very interesting about him just as a human, and then it kind of rolls into where all of this goes next, where I don't think he necessarily knew what Andrew was going to ask him. I totally get the feeling that like they just like vibed when Andrew talked to him and like asked him to do the interview, and they were like, cool, because this, just by like how long this went on, how organic the conversation was, and I think they both like genuinely enjoyed themselves. But no, I just wanted to include this part because it's like, it's not just the political analysis parts of it that I'm doing, that a lot of other people in media have done on YouTube. You know, there's a couple articles written about this, but I don't know how heavily they played clips of this on network TV. But, you know, like, I feel like I came away from watching this interview like with the experience of like, yo, like this guy, you know, he had a really tough life. He made a lot of really bad choices and everything, but like he's a very introspective human being, and also very observant of what's happening around him, as we'll see as we continue to dive further into these clips.
We are caught in this loop. It's like the permanent Reconstruction loop, okay? The permanent Jim Crow loop is that every single time that we get closer to that idea, that promise, that potential of a more perfect union, what ends up fucking happening is they come in and they shut the door down because there's this evil symbiosis between money and power. So what do? If I said to you, look, I'm going to tell you a story from the past. It's about a minority group of people that live in a country. It's constitutional democracy that has had its problems in the past, but it's an economic powerhouse, and it is the center of learning, it's the center of culture, it has a deep and rich history. But there is a minority group that those in power that came into power through democratically elected means are going to target this minority group because they're stealing all the jobs.
Today, our cities are flooded with illegal aliens. Americans are being squeezed out of the labor force and their jobs are taken.
They're not originally citizens. They're not the original people.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're not sending you. They're not sending you.
On top of that, they're spreading disease and distrust. And they're criminals. And they can be violent. They're eating your dogs and cats.
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats.
And what we're going to do is we're going to send masked men to this marginalized group. And we are going to take them, put them on planes, put them on buses, put them on trains, and send them to a prison camp in a foreign country. What am I describing right then? Am I describing Germany? Or am I describing the United States right now? Because I will tell you what, if you think that the prison in El Salvador is not a fucking concentration camp, you're out of your fucking mind. Tell me anybody that's returning from there. You saw those pictures. Do you think anybody's getting out of there? Or, is it a rehabilitation center? You think I've been to those places in South Sudan and around in those areas? You think anybody's getting out of those South Sudan prisons? Ever? Ever? Out of your fucking mind. That's a death camp. They're done. They're over. And if you're not dead, you would want to be dead if you were in that prison. And we just sent a bunch of people without due process, some of them most likely legally in the United States. Like, I think of that poor guy that they said was a gang member because he had a tattoo on his arm that was a makeup artist. And they say he's MS-13. He literally a makeup artist that fled, I think, I'm making it up, Venezuela because of a dictator, and came to the United States and sought asylum, received asylum, and they literally take this poor guy and they pick him up, and he has a family, and he has friends, and he has an entire community, and they give him no due process, and they put him on a plane with maybe a bunch of other criminals and send him to that fucking hellscape. He's dead, and nobody gives a shit. And I mean it. Like, we sit here and we talk about the one guy because there's a clear legal path to being able to get him back. What about all those other people? Am I not supposed to feel for someone? Am I going to be like all these Democrats say, you have to talk about and realize that people are really upset about illegal immigration? Fuck you. How do you think your hotel room gets cleaned? How do you think you got food on your fucking table? Who do you think washes your dishes? Who do you think does your fucking garden? Who do you think is here by the fucking sheer fucking just grit and will that they figured out a way to get here because they thought that they could give themselves and their family a better chance. And he's somehow convinced all of us that these people are the fucking criminals? White men in America are 45 more times likely to commit a fucking violent crime than an immigrant. And the media says, well, you got David Axelrod and, Rahm fucking Emanuel. So fucking smart, Rahm Emanuel. He said, we got to understand that these people are really mad. And we got to appeal to these white voters. Rahm, the only people that fucking appealed to those fucking white voters was Joe Biden, 81 years old. And he got 81 million votes, and he did not because he appeased their fucking Trumpian sense, but because he challenged it.
All right, so right off the rip, just at the very end of that clip there, I've got to call out the wild inaccuracy that Joe Biden was like the white man whisperer. Let's not do revisionist history and forget that in the Democratic primary in 2020, which is the election he's referring to, that Bernie Sanders absolutely starched him in the first 4 states of voting with white men. Biden came in 4th place in the Iowa caucus. He came in 5th place in the New Hampshire primary, 2 of the whitest states in the country, right? And Bernie won, he won both of those states, 1st place. And then Biden came in 3rd in Nevada, right? It wasn't until Barack Obama picked up the phone and cajoled, threatened, and made deals with Buttigieg, Klobuchar, and others to immediately drop out and clear the path for Biden, right? He consolidated the centrist Democratic Party vote. They all combined in Fort Voltron to be able to beat Bernie in every dirty way possible, right? Let's not keep doing this, right? So that's why this interview is so polarizing and interesting, especially for me from a leftist perspective, because there's a ton of stuff in here where it's like, yeah, like he's like a lot of his analysis with, what's happening right now in immigration. I agree with all that. You know what I mean? And that really shines through and shows how much he cares about people. And I think his father did too, to some degree, right? Or, well, to a lot of a degree. He just didn't have any real idea of how in this modern political moment, like how to wield power to be able to bring any of that caring he had for people to bear truly, right? And then he was also bogged down by the means testing, super professionalized version of this Democratic Party, not the one that he was in back in the 80s, right? Now, so Hunter's hitting the historical analysis here pretty well, but what he's missing in his political thesis, which most older Democrats miss, is that the evil symbiosis he's referring to, right? The evil symbiosis between money and power for sure is consistently acting against minority groups to ensure its own continuity of power. It's easy for a government to instill obedience through direct or indirect financial, social, and physical violence toward a perceived second-class citizenry, right? Like perceived by the in-group. But more importantly and more broadly, that evil symbiosis he's referring to is acting against the working class at large. Whether done consciously or not, oppression of marginalized groups is merely a step toward that ultimate goal of keeping the status quo in power imbalance, that imbalance in the power between the oligarchs and the people. And the issue I take with Democrats who will exclusively conduct this analysis through the lens of oppression of minorities is the fact that it actually aids that evil symbiosis in their primary goal of ensuring that the working class never sees themselves as the overwhelming majority that share common goals. To keep them viewing politics in the world through that racial, religious, gendered lens. And that isn't to say that those things aren't important, right? But ultimately, history shows us that individual groups have their most major political emancipatory successes when they join together, utilizing class struggle as the major vehicle to deliver and then extract their demands from the system. Whether that be through violent revolution, at the ballot box, or leveraging labor, this has always been the case. The reason the Trump administration can so brazenly send political dissidents and immigrants, documented and undocumented alike, and now American citizens, apparently, too, right? The reason he can do this is because Republicans have captured the Supreme Court, they control Congress, and most importantly, we, the people, are allowing it by not doing anything, right? And I don't just mean protests in pockets and, single day, weekend protests in this region, that region, this state, whatever. I mean mass mobilizations of American humanity, right? To shut down commerce, financial boycotting, work stoppages. Barely any American citizen is even remotely willing to put anything on the line to oppose genocidal, inhumane behavior by our government. That's done with our tax money on our behalf. After the big beautiful bill, $170 billion is going to border enforcement, ICE, new detention centers, transportation for mass deportations. No one in America has anywhere near enough class solidarity to feel threatened by any of this for two reasons. One, because these people don't look like them and they don't speak their language, or at least not fluently. And two, because they don't want to lose what they already have, no matter how little it actually is. This is the formula for modern oppression in the past 100 years or so. It has evolved to exist within the framework of a civility politics that's draped over the hyper-capitalist system. So when we on the left build our personal political ideologies, with the primary principle being human rights for specific groups, or even more broadly, an intersectional struggle for rights, it usually ends, right? When that's the main goal, when that's the single issue or a handful of issues that people are fighting for from the left side of politics, right? It usually ends in a complacence with incrementalist reforms that are offered by the elites, right? The Civil Rights Act, gay marriage, trans rights on the state level, Native American sovereignty, the first black president. I can go on. These are all brief respite for rights that, yes, needed to be won, but ultimately stopped short of true economic freedom and true economic reforms. Yes, in a capitalist system, having the rights to roll the same dice on the monopoly board as cis white men will improve everyone who's in the out group. It will improve their chance at success in this system. But ultimately, working class people as a whole are having the noose slowly tightened around them at the same time. Right? Some women, some people of color, some folks from the LGBTQ plus community will succeed with some of the social reforms. Of course, it will make it easier for them to succeed in this system. And when you grow up feeling like the deck is stacked against you, and then you live through some of the positive reforms and end up winning the game of Monopoly, right? Being able to provide for your children, your family, house and clothe them, feed them, all of that. It feels great. But at the end of the day, the system that remains oppressive to working class people at large, with the hyper commodification of housing, depressed wages, union busting, inflation, corporate and political corruption, it will continue to dominate and grind down and ultimately obliterate a huge chunk of working class people, of wage earners, with denied health care, food insecurity, gentrification. That to me is no victory, right? My politics, from my perspective, I'm not fighting for change just for me and my children, right? I want it for the people who I grew up with, that grew up in ways no child should have, right? For people that I've worked with in my adult life that contribute in meaningful ways to our daily lives by providing food and services we need, making things, right? Who, even after working their asses off all day, every day of their lives, still struggle to feed, clothe, and provide healthcare to their children and family members that they care for, right? That is something that the system, in response to a lot of these social reforms and moderate economic reforms, right? This is the system has learned how to mollify, how to co-opt large energetic bursts in these movements. Look at the Black Lives Matter movement, right? All the everything wrapped up around George Floyd, and that's what I'm saying, like, right? So when I'm referring back to all of this, saying like, oh, the civil rights, this isn't me saying that like those weren't good things. Don't hear what I'm not saying. My point is, like, Lyndon Johnson responding to the Civil Rights Act, that was good. He was leveraged. He was forced to, right? But the problem is, so many people scope the scope of their politics at that time, and even now, even today, right? Use gay marriage, for example. A lot of people just went home after that, right? And the people who were most likely to just go home after that are the people which the social reform was the last piece of what they needed in their Maslow's hierarchy of need, right? Like, a lot of those people who were like middle class or better, that was like the last piece of respect that they felt they weren't getting from the country, and it was given to them. So then they go home, right? That's what capitulation from a government looks like, right? Even if they're not doing it consciously, right? The system will spit out in response, like, what's the minimum we can give to the angry mob, our citizenry, to get enough of them to go home where there isn't enough energy to, like, do a mass labor strike or something like that, right? And we've seen little blips of this stuff pop up on the radar in the last decade or so of our politics, right? Basically, like, right after the end of Barack Obama's presidency, we've seen all that. And the reason you didn't see a lot of it, like, we had like Occupy Wall Street and all of that, but you didn't see a lot of that while Obama was president, simply because of the fact that a lot of Black America and a lot of their allies in social justice movements were completely mollified simply by the fact that there was a black man in the White House, right? And again, not to say that that's not important, but don't forget, a lot of the things that Biden did that were war crimes. A lot of the things that Trump did that were war crimes, Obama did first. Drone striking an American citizen, right? Suspending habeas corpus, which is what Trump's doing right now, right? But with immigrants. Obama did it first. He set the precedent. So, like, don't forget, it's not about him as a human. My point is, the system will chug and plug on and continue to try to operate in ways that will guarantee its own solvency going forward. Okay? All of these people went to the same schools. All of these people hang out with the same people. All of these folks receive money from the same giant megacorps and super PACs and billionaires, right? They have class solidarity in that regard. Okay? So the only thing, what makes perfect sense is if you're going to view your politics through a valence of, hey, social justice rights are extremely important to me, then one of your primary goals whenever it comes to like actually doing the work, like political praxis, is understanding what is the best vehicle to bring that forward, right? the best vehicle to bringing that forward is, a united class struggle. No one achieved any type of suffrage or, social rights politically in this country with just their group. You know what I mean? That's just facts, folks. Just facts. Let's move on to the next section.
It's how we handle people that age in front of our eyes and recognize that they may have lost a physical step, but that does not mean they don't have the mental capacity to continue to do their job, and whether there still should be to be valued. So my dad grew old in front of everybody's eyes. And the difference between whether or not you thought that he was politically viable based upon your own biases, or whether you thought that he was politically capable based upon his accomplishments. Just remember, Joe Biden got 81 million votes. And it wasn't because of Donald Trump that Joe Biden got 81 million votes. Joe Biden got more votes than anybody that's ever run for president in the United States before, by a large margin. I mean, just think about it this way. The maximum number of votes that Barack Obama got just 8 years earlier was 69 million, okay? Population hasn't grown that much. They had the highest voter participation of any presidential election since 1901. Joe Biden had the most successful midterms of any president on either party in their first term since FDR in 1932. We won more state we won more state houses, more governorships. We picked up a seat in the Senate, which has never happened since 1932, and we held the Republican gains in the House to an all-time low, lower than in even 1932. Then, with the slimmest majority of any president ever, with a 50-50 Senate and a 4 or 5 vote majority in the House of Representatives, he passed more legislation in 2 years than any president has in 8 years since Lyndon B. Johnson, including the Investment Reduction Act, the Recovery Act, including the PACT Act, which was troops health care, the first gun legislation that has been passed in a generation, and the list goes on and on. And he came off of that, and for some reason, the intelligentsia of the Democratic Party, with 2020 hindsight, believes that Joe Biden should have considered not running again because of their perception that he was too old. And so then the drumbeat began. And the New York Post the New York Times, on a near daily basis, egged on by the Pod Save America saviors of the Democratic Party, with 4 white millionaires that are dining out on their association with Barack Obama from 16 years ago, living in Beverly fucking Hills, telling the rest of the world what black voters in South Carolina really want, or what the women in the waitress living outside of Green Bay, Wisconsin really believes. I mean, what the fuck? I mean, I can't believe that we do this over and over again.
Yeah.
Or I hear Rahm Emanuel is going to run for president. What a fucking, David Axelrod's going to run his campaign for him. That's like, oh boy, there's the answer. There's the fucking answer. Genius is all. All of the things that they want. You remember this, is that everybody talks about Joe Biden now as if he was somehow the choice of the Democratic Party. Bullshit. We lost Iowa. We lost New Hampshire. We came in second in Nevada. David Plouffe and David Axelrod went on TV. They said that there's no way Joe Biden can get the nomination, not a chance in the world. Mike Bloomberg is going to crush him in California. Elizabeth Warren's going to beat him in Massachusetts. There's going to get wiped out in Texas. He doesn't have the money to run. A lot of rural voters said, fuck you, we love Joe. A lot of urban voters said, fuck you, we love Joe. And they voted for him overwhelmingly.
All right. So this was probably the part of the interview that I was happiest to actually to hear him say, because and really it's because of what we mentioned at the beginning, right? Like him doing this interview in just his celebrity, basically, right, forced the New York Times and a lot of legacy media to kind of cover it, because he went on a tear. This is just a handful of clips out of this. I think this is in total, I clipped 23 minutes of a 3-hour interview. him lighting up like David Axelrod, Rahm Emanuel, the podcast, Johns. I mean, he's not wrong. He's 100% right. He's 100% right. Like, the Democratic Party has placed so much importance and so much weight, and James Carville too, he mentions him later, so much importance and weight to a handful of these men who in their 40 year political careers have only been right one time. And that was with Barack Obama. And again, he says it later in the interview, and I've been screaming it for, I don't know, a decade at this point, right? Since like 2015. Where that was all Obama. Those people didn't. That was him. That was his force of will. That was his charisma, right? Any amateur campaign manager could have won a national election with that guy. Are you kidding me? Even now to this day. In the 2024 election, when he was stumping for Biden, doing speeches, he was out there murdering crowds. Are you kidding me? So we're supposed to assume that like perfect example, like Patrick Mahomes, right? If you didn't have Andy Reid, he'd still be winning like 8-9 games a year, right? He's elite. That's the whole point. But somehow the Democratic Party wants you to continue to see James Carville's face on MSNBC, and anytime there's energy around someone like Zoran Mamdani, or there's left energy in the party, they roll his old ass out. He rolls up in his wheelchair to be like, oh, well, let me tell you now why this isn't going to work. Fuck that guy. Hunter Biden's 100. He's 1,000,000% correct here. That's absolute insanity that we're still putting that much stock in these handful of people. The Pod Save America was like one of the top podcasts in the country. I've listened to it multiple times. There is nothing they're saying on that show. It's literal regurgitation of like the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. There is no nuanced opinion of anything. They only recently, after Biden just lost, even start kind of maybe hinting at viewing things from a semi-left perspective, right? Like, these are the platforms, these are the podcasts, these are the media characters that the party wants to uplift as if they're the master strategists. They're the people who speak for those in the party around the country. Like Biden said, like a waitress in Wisconsin, like a black voter in South Carolina. These guys don't fucking know. And to be fair, I don't really think Joe Biden did all that much either. But at the very least, like, he actually went to those places. He did have a long career of actually going in those places, right? There's like a million photos from hundreds of different days of like Joe Biden at black churches. He went and did the work. He actually went and sat with people and talked, right? Granted, his presidency in this last run wasn't the greatest example of it, but like, he actually did put in that work. All these other guys that we're talking about that he's naming right now did not do that. They didn't do that. So they should not be the folks that regular people should be turning on and sitting there like, oh yeah, well this is the guy. No, fuck those guys. They have zero authority, none. You want to know why? Because they've been wrong as shit. Especially Rahm Emanuel. Are you kidding me? He oversaw one of the most disastrous midterm elections for the Democratic Party in its history since before the fucking Whig Party was dissolved. Are you kidding me? Ridiculous. So more broadly though, so on this part right here, Hunter, he's so laser focused on great man theory with adulation and respect for his father that he attributes all of the political will in the country that was mustered to accomplish these things that his father did. He signed the bill. He turned it into law. Sure. Okay. But he's attributing them like purely to his father's leadership. And he's completely disregarding the effects of the mass political effects that COVID, George Floyd, the culmination of the Black Lives Matter agenda, all of these things. Like, remember, during this time, a huge chunk of Americans, I've talked about this millions of times before, a huge chunk of Americans were out of work, bringing home unemployment checks bolstered by COVID relief funds that equated in them making more money than they'd ever had in their lives. So what does that do? Americans had an incredible amount of time and energy to commit to thoughts and discourse about things larger than themselves, political considerations, a huge swath of the country that normally is just too busy in their day-to-day to even like engage in politics had the opportunity to, right? social media, the internet age. Everybody just had time. So COVID ripped away the political veil that so many apolitical people, had over their eyes in the course of a year or two, right? So this was happening at the same time that our government and most other governments around the world had no choice but to conduct stimulus policy to keep capitalism's wheels from completely fucking falling off. This created the room for the great majority of this legislation to be passed, right? That's the materialist analysis of our recent history. It's super obvious that Joe Biden wasn't some unique, powerful actor in history. He wasn't, okay? We're not going to look back. American children in 100 years are going to be looking back at a history book where Joe Biden's put in the same, on the same pedestal as like FDR. Get the fuck, stop, right? That's crazy. So that's the main issue I have with some of the, again, if you go watch the full interview yourself, Hunter, he really spends a lot of time with like and I get it. Hey, it's your dad. He loves his dad. I get that. That's fair. But like the political analysis is incorrect, man. Just straight up. It couldn't be any further from the facts, right? Like any normal establishment politician that won that election and was the Democratic winner would have executed almost the exact same agenda due to political pressure and economic demands, both globally and domestically, right? And they would have had the same exact advisors, mind you, because that's one thing the Democratic Party does not do, right? There is no like, oh, you lost, you're losers, get out, I'm bringing my own people in. That's one thing the Republicans do well. You might get a handful of guys that might be hangers on here or there, or like you might see somebody's son, like, like Bill Barr, like his dad was big back in the day. You might see a little bit of nepotism here and there, but for the most part, look at look at his most recent administration here. Even his first one, he fired a shitload of those people. Those were hangers on from the establishment. And then he realized like, yeah, actually this isn't my flavor. He got rid of them quick. No Democrat would ever think to do something like that. They'd be too terrified. Oh, it's a political scandal. Oh, or, these are apolitical appointments, some of these, where you had like, for example, Obama and Biden both kept on a ton of right-wing people in appointed positions just because like they thought it would be like, uncouth. Ridiculous. Absolute bullshit.
Sure. Before we continue about the vultures, I have a George Clooney story. Hopefully we can leave it in. My only really famous Hollywood friend is actor Jack Black, from School of Rock. And so we used to be neighbors in Los Feliz. And so Tenacious D did a concert in Sydney, Australia. This is a day after they tried to assassinate Trump in Butler, PA. And I guess Jack Black's guitarist or whatever jumps up on stage and he yells something to the effect of, hey, next time you try to shoot Trump, aim a little bit closer.
Don't miss Trump next time.
George Clooney is blowing his phone up, being like, if you don't kick your band member out of the band and like publicly denounce this guy, like, I don't know what the consequences were, but it was kind of like, you're out of what, we don't know. And so his hand was basically forced to be like, oh, sorry, my band member has serious mental health problems. We're breaking up the band for now. The tour's canceled. And so, I mean, it is cool to see Hollywood actors voice more progressive opinions, but
fuck him. Fuck him and everybody around him. I don't have to be fucking nice. Number one, I agree with Quentin Tarantino. Fucking George Clooney is not a fucking actor. He is a fucking, I don't know what he is. He's a brand. And by the way, and God bless him. You know what? He supposedly treats his friends really well. You know what I mean? Buys them things. And he's got a really great place in Lake Como. And he's great friends with Barack Obama. Fuck you. What do you have to do with fucking anything? Why do I have to fucking listen to you? What right do you have to step on a man who's given 52 years of his fucking life to the service of this country and decide that you, George Clooney, are going to take out basically a full-page ad in the fucking New York Times to undermine the president at a time in which, by the way, what do people care about the most? Why do you think that the Republicans have an advantage over us? Because they're unified. They will go along with anything. I wasn't asking anybody to go along with anything. I was asking people to go along with this. The most successful administration in my lifetime. And I'm including the Obama administration, I'm including the Reagan administration, I'm including every administration in my lifetime. We have gotten more done for the agenda of the things that your generation and my generation cared about than any president in history. And we didn't get it all done, but more than anybody else with the slimmest majority ever. And everybody said that there's no way that he's ever going to be able to do that. And you know what George Clooney did? because he sat down, I guess, because he was like given a blessing by the Obama team or the Obama people and whoever else, and David Axelrod and whoever the fuck else, is to go, okay, yeah, you know what? We are going to insert our judgment over yours. Me and James Carville, who hasn't run a race in 40 fucking years, and David Axelrod, who had one success in his political life, and that was Barack Obama. And that was because of Barack Obama, not because of fucking David Axelrod. And David Plouffe, and all of these guys, and the Pod Save America guys, who were junior fucking speechwriters in, on Barack Obama's Senate staff, who have been dining out on the relationship with him for years, making millions of dollars. The Anita Dunns of the world, who's made 40, 50 million dollars off the Democratic Party. They're all going to insert their judgment over a man who has figured out, unlike anybody else, how to get elected to the United States Senate over 7 times, how to pass more legislation than any president in history, how to have a better midterm election than anybody in history, and how to garner more votes than any president that has ever run. And they're going to replace their judgment for his.
All right. Oh my God, the James Carville, the Axelrod, the Pod Johnson, Anita Dunn. Yo, I mean, he was. The funny thing is too, like, you can tell it's not just because these are the interlocutors that he's identifying, that he's calling out specifically, that he feels wronged his father with all of the the media campaigns to basically get him to move out. You can tell he thought this before that. You can tell, because these aren't the kinds of opinions that you formulate just because you think that these guys who've been in at the helm of the Democratic media machine for this many years. This isn't an opinion you formulate just because of like one instance. He's totally thought this for a long time, and like I said, this is why I'm so glad that this is getting the kind of coverage because he's 100% correct. Like he's 100%. James Carville hasn't picked a winning horse in decades, folks. Okay? Losers. Lighting your Act Blue money on fire. Okay? Look at the record. We're not going to keep hating on it, but I'm telling you right now, please, for the love of God, when you see these people on TV, just remember, they're putting in front of your face to give you advice on how you should vote, how you should think, how you should conduct political analysis in your own mind, blah, blah, blah. They're putting losers in front of you to do that. Okay. Now, more specifically to Hunter's, again, like his really uncritical analysis of his father's career. Like, Joe Biden was not just a stuttering kid from Scranton, like he says, right? Like, while Joe Biden was the senator from Delaware, he had a nickname. He was nicknamed the senator from NBNA. MBNA is the Maryland Bank National Association. It's one of the largest credit card trust holders on the East Coast. In 2005, Biden wrote and ultimately got passed legislation called the BAP-CPA, right? Elizabeth Warren talked about this in the 2020 election. The BAP-CPA stands for the Bankruptcy Abuse Prevention and Consumer Protection Act, which was essentially a huge giveaway to banks and creditors. It created a means-tested system for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, where only people barely above the poverty line could file for it, with everyone else being relegated to Chapter 13, right? So the difference between the two, right? Chapter 7 bankruptcy allows filers to wipe away their debts after full insolvency and liquidation while retaining some assets like a home, a car, and some amenities like clothes and personal effects and stuff like that, right? Chapter 13 requires that a portion of a debtor's future income is guaranteed to going to pay back their creditors, right? So just on its face, before we even get into the legislation, like, remember, folks, like, I get it. People, you should pay your debts, all that. I agree. But at the end of the day, like, these banks where people are taking out these credit cards, like at like 30, 35% nowadays, exorbitant interest rates, like, right, that Tucker hit on that in that last clip that we played in last week's episode. They already made their principal back, right? So for the government to pass legislation like this, where you're basically saying like, oh, no, you're going to pay all the interest back in full too. That's fucking wild, right? So the most damaging part of the BAP-CPA was it classified student loan debt as an unforgivable loan, unclearable by bankruptcy, right? Making it the most single responsible bill for the student loan debt crisis, and an absolute hammer blow to the foundation of the American economy that heavily contributed to the 2008 crash. And you never see this framed this way, ever. Even during the autopsies that happened in 2012, years later, after Barack Obama had won his second presidency, of course, right? Like, none of that was framed that way. And Elizabeth Warren had brought it up on the 2020 campaign because she specifically was, a huge part of creating the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, right? Which was meant to counteract some of that, at least on like, the commodity end of it, right? The student loan debt being unforgivable is like, that's set in stone. That's you'd have to undo a ton of legislation, right? Because just when the BAPCPA got passed, it got pushed through like many of our other larger bills that you see in our recent politics of the last 10 years, right? There was a bunch of other stuff attached to it that then got set in stone with future tax bills. So it would require a lot of unpacking to be able to actually get to it, or political will, but no one in the Democratic Party has that right now. And also, I should mention that Hunter Biden, don't forget, he was being paid by MBNA, the Maryland Bank National Association, from 1996 to 2001 as a consultant, clearing $100K per year, right? And at this time, Joe Biden was consistently trying to pass legislation, which he ultimately did in 2005. But during that period, he was trying to pass that legislation. So this is what right-wingers talk about when they, obviously like the laptop stuff, that was way overblown. It was just basically another Benghazi. But, there was legitimacy to, and it wasn't just right-wingers. People on the left talked about it too. Like, there was definitely pay for play going on there. And then it was eerily reminiscent of that with Ukraine, right? Same thing was kind of going on with, forgetting the name of the company, Burisma or whatever. Same thing, where Hunter was like pulling salaries from companies that were able to be directly influenced, their financial outcomes, those companies, by his father's political power, right? So let's not, this isn't, obviously Andrew didn't go into that. This wasn't that kind of it wasn't like an adversarial interview, which was the correct take, right? Like you got this guy talking for 3 hours. You got a lot of what I think is really great insight. No one's really Jill Biden, Joe's wife hasn't really done any media hits. No one else in the Biden family, and all of the inside information that you hear, all the stuff that like leaks from people that are close to the family, like everything was saying like they were super wrong by the way that this all happened. And obviously Hunter's spilling it all right here. But all right, let's continue.
Not to mention too about actors. When actors take up very like staunch progressive opinions, it gives working class Americans the perception that left-leaning beliefs are elitist, because they're seeing all these rich people that they perceive to be these untouchable celebrities in the shining lights in the marquee as being liberal. So it's really easy to market conservatism as like a working man's countercultural thing.
And what was the one thing that Joe Biden, no one ever could pin on him?
That he was
a left-leaning, rich, liberal elitist.
Yeah.
The one thing that Joe Biden was not, that they could not take away from Joe Biden, he was the stuttering kid from fucking Scranton that fucking worked his way up, and that he said some fucking things that were a little impolitic at times, but you know what? He reminded me of my dad. Not my idiot dad, but my dad who brought us through the tough times. And I knew at the end of the day that Joe Biden actually cared about me. And you know what? I think Joe Biden is a little bit as confused about what transgender is as I am. But and I know that he also is not going to do? He's not going to beat the shit out of my kid if I decide to let my kid be transgender. But he's going to say, I don't get it. Like, explain it to me. You know what I mean? Like, explain it to me. That's who he is. He's the guy that's going to be asked in an interview when he was vice president, well, what do you think about marriage between a man and a man? And he's going to say, I think love is love. Doesn't mean that he has to necessarily understand it, but all he knows is his own personal experience. But he wasn't shoving it down your throat like George Clooney shoving it down your fucking throat. He was given a choice. We are going to fight you every step of the way. The party is going to implode. We are going to have a floor fight. We are going to attempt to stop you. We are going to challenge you. We're going to have the Black Caucus, the Hispanic Caucus, the progressive wing of the party against the liberal elite money side of the party. And that they were going to try to dry up all the money. And so they decided that they were going to do a nuclear option. So Joe Biden, I think, did the most selfless thing that I know of any politician in the history of this fucking country did. He stepped aside to save the party. And in that void filled the only person that he would ever endorse out of the gate, because he chose her as his vice president. There's no choice in that. And by the way, I love Kamala Harris. I think that she would have made an incredible president. I know that she was an incredibly loyal vice president. And she did everything that she could to support my dad. Everything. And to support me and my family, personally. I mean, I truly love her like family. And I think that she would have made an incredible president. And I think she ran an incredible campaign. You know who did not want Kamala Harris to be president and did not want her to be the nominee? Nancy Pelosi didn't want her to be. None of Nancy Pelosi's people wanted her to be. They wanted an open convention. They wanted a floor fight. They wanted I don't know what the hell they wanted, but they wanted to be the ones to anoint whoever they were going to anoint to become the next president of the United States.
Who do you think that would have been?
I don't know. I really don't know. I don't have any idea. All I know is that they definitely did not want Kamala Harris. And again, which undermined her, which undermined the campaign. You know, I mean, I look at these people and talk about like, well, where were they? We had 100 days. She literally was handed a $100 million check. She ran her ass off. She had an incredible organization, incredible grassroots organization. David Plouffe took over the campaign. You know, what did they do? Where did they spend their money?
Those camo hats they thought were going to make the kids go crazy, but most of the kids are pretty Palestine pilled.
Look, I'm telling you, one of the reason I think that whether, you know, I'm not a conspiracy theorist completely, but I don't know what happened in that election. I don't think that it was her fault necessarily. I don't think that it was anybody's fault except this. One of the reasons that people would stick with my dad is because of the loyalty that they had to him. And you had to be unified. You have to make it feel like you're part of something. What they proved, what the Democratic Party proved, is they have no guts. The people that came out against him were who? Nobody, except Speaker Pelosi, Speaker Emeritus Pelosi, did not give a full-throated endorsement, which allowed everybody else to kind of go, okay. Except who came out full-throated? Progressives, AOC, Bernie, the entire progressive ring, Ro Khanna, the entirety of the progressive side of the Democratic Party said Joe Biden has got more of our agenda accomplished in 4 years than any president in history.
All right. So the reason that last clip is super relevant is two big reasons. Like, first of all, he's the only person so far since Joe Biden dropped out, all the way since from that point till now, that had an inside track to actually see what was happening, like while that political sausage was being made. No one else has done anywhere near of a long form interview. You get little clips, little mini media hits, little blurbs, little leaked stuff here or there. You had from people who really, you know, staffers, folks who didn't really have like great insight. Like Hunter was right there. You're hearing him tell it. Like he was super locked in with Kamala during the transition after his father dropped out, all that. So super insightful, right? But that last part, the second reason that this clip's important, that last part where he's saying like, who wanted him to drop out? Nobody. That's crazy. All of the polling showed that a majority of Democrats wanted him to drop out after that debate. That was not even in question. So to say like, oh, nobody wanted him to drop out, that's insane. That's not true. There were people in the media that just weren't at these elite levels of the folks that he's naming that were saying it openly. There were people, and again, the American people, more importantly, the people of your party did want that. So that's absolutely wild to frame that way. And then also off of that point that he made, like he was like, oh, and who supported him? Ro Khanna, Bernie, AOC. They were wrong. And the entire left was like, why are you hitching yourself to this guy? His brain is oatmeal. What are you doing? There was no scenario in which the Democratic Party, the people who actually had power at the time, like, you know, he's naming Pelosi. Like, yeah, Pelosi was correct. She was correct to not really hop in on any side, because you know what that is when the elites of a party aren't trying to put their finger on the scale. It does two things. Sure, they might be playing it soft or, you know, being non-committal, and that might frustrate people. But at the end of the day, what it really does when nobody really puts their finger on the scale, no one like hops out and like takes a hard position, what it does is it allows the court of public opinion to sort of play and tease itself out. That's democratic. There is nothing wrong about that. Like that, it's super weird. Obviously, again, it's it's because it's from the perspective of him, thinking his father is the greatest president since FDR, according to him, which, there were plenty of articles written that way. But yeah, Pelosi was correct. An open convention would have been the right move. Initial polling showed that was the case. She was advocating for what Democrat voters wanted for weeks prior to him dropping out, right? A more democratic process. And to not lay any blame at the feet of Kamala is just insane. Like, you're the current VP. You didn't use your bully pulpit at all to your advantage. You ran as if you weren't already in office to some degree, right? And let's keep it real. Like J.B. Pritzker, Gavin Newsom, Bernie Sanders. There's like 3 more people I could name right now that could have easily wiped Trump. Like shit, Pete Buttigieg would have had a better shot than Kamala. She had no sauce, zero sauce. Stop lying. It's 2025. People want charismatic, articulate leaders that can evoke their concerns and speak to them with passion. She offered none of that. That is why she lost. And then the other crazy part is at the same time that he's saying like, oh, she's this great. She was a great candidate. She ran a great campaign, blah, blah, blah. He's also trying to make very light of the fact, like he's saying, oh, well, she had 100 days. That's nothing. What are you talking about? Like, oh, she had 100 days and $100 million. Yeah, okay, money's cool. But at the end of the day, when you have a weak candidate, I don't think there was any point when she ran in the 2020 election, there was no point at which she polled above like 6 or 7%. Remember, she dropped out before Obama even called everybody up and threatened, coerced, and cajoled them to get out to clear the way for Biden in the first place. She was already out of here, folks. The only time that she's ever... Obviously, she won elections in California, but I mean, come on, let's be for real. I'm from New York. I know what it's a blue bastion state. If you have money behind you and the party does what Obama did in the scenario of the 2020 Democratic primary and they clear the field, that's what's going to happen. She never had any meaningful challenge. What, she beat Republicans in California? That doesn't mean anything to me. And again, look at what happened when she actually had to be on the national stage. That's all that matters. Okay, like. Remember, Pete Buttigieg almost beat Bernie in New Hampshire in the second state. Like, he had sauce, even though I don't agree with his politics. But to try to, like, retroactively run through, like, something that happened that recently and make it seem like she did a great job is absolutely insane, right? And then, and just to the point of, like, specifically of Joe Biden stepping aside, like, Jill Biden, his wife, and his entire staff spent months gaslighting the shit out of the American people prior to him stepping out of the race. Hunter doesn't get to rewrite history so soon. Like, it's really disrespectful to our intelligence. Everyone around Joe Biden kept up the Weekend at Bernie's act as long as they could. Most people that I know aren't mad at Joe Biden personally, right? Like, Hunter's trying to frame it that way. Most people I know that's not the case. They're not mad at him for just being old. And that's how Hunter's trying to frame it. Like, no, we're mad at you, your family, and all the little parasites that were clinging on to him, trying to use him like a sock puppet and telling us all not to believe our lying eyes when we could clearly see your hands up his ass making him speak. We saw it, right? I mean, Kamala would have been a great president. She could barely put 2 sentences together, just like your dad at the end, except she's 30 years younger and had no positions on anything. Like, that's just, I'm sorry. That's a insane take. That's insane. But yeah, that's all I've got for this segment. Everyone go watch Channel 5 News with Andrew Callahan. He has some great content. Hunter's political analysis aside, like I said at the beginning, the first hour or so of the 3-hour interview actually has some great moments of him discussing like his now 6-year-long sobriety, lessons learned, and just some great like empathic conversation, very observant conversation of like the world around him and how he interfaces with it. So it really it's a shame that he never truly got into politics, because he has his father's charisma and penchant for defending the everyday man. But he would have had the benefit of like being significantly younger and probably having better politics because of it. All right, so let's move to the New York Times article. All right. So what we got here is we have a New York Times article titled "Democrats' 2024 Autopsy is Described as Avoiding the Likeliest Cause of Death." Excuse me. It's written by Reed J. Epstein and Shane Goldmacher. So the reason that I think this pairs very nicely with the Hunter interview is because in a crazy way, right? This whole article is basically, just to give like a brief synopsis of it. It's basically this journalist writing about like, hey, I talked to some folks. The Democratic Party is going to do an autopsy. They're going to do an investigation basically into their loss in the 2024 presidential election. But you'll see here as we get into it, like, we're not going to actually look into anything meaningful. We're not going to analyze the strategic choices of the campaigns. We're not going to analyze the timing of or the decision of Joe Biden to drop out. None of that, right? Which is insane because those are like the two most actual meaningful pillars of this house that fell over, right? And so that's madness to not do that. But that's why like the Hunter interview is so nice because he's doing it. Like he's doing it, granted, from his biased perspective. But we got to have some insight from what we will not get from what the DNC is saying here in this article. We will not get that. We will not get any actual like play-by-play of specific moments or decisions that were made. So here, let's kick it off. It starts with the Democratic National Committee's examination of what went wrong in the 2024 election is expected to mostly steer clear of the decisions made by the Biden-turned-Harris campaign and will focus more heavily instead on actions taken by allied groups, according to interviews with 6 people briefed on the report's progress. The audit, which the committee is calling a, quote, after-action review, is expected to avoid the questions of whether former President Joseph R. Biden Jr. should have run for re-election in the first place, whether he should have exited the race earlier than he did, and whether former Vice President Kamala Harris was the right choice to replace him, according to people briefed on the process so far. So, like I said, that's insane. There's no way that this investigation could be completely meaningless. We'll see as we read on. Nor is the review expected to revisit key decisions by the Harris campaign, like framing the election as a choice between democracy and fascism, and refraining from hitting back after an ad by Donald J. Trump memorably attacked Ms. Harris on transgender rights by suggesting that she was for, quote, they, them, while Mr. Trump was for, quote, for you. That have roiled Democrats in the months since Mr. Trump took back in the White House. So, yeah, I remember that ad. It was, I don't really think that, like, obviously, like, the right-wingers got a ton of play on that. So maybe the analysis of, like, hey, it was used as an attack ad a ton, which it was. If you remember TV at the time, like, the month preceding the election, basically, like, October through November, that is the only ad they played over and over and over again. I think it was less relevant to like the they them thing. They're making it seem as if obviously right wingers that don't like that, but they were never going to vote for Harris. They're making it seem like independents really had a problem with that. No one I've ever talked to or seen anyone who, is like a centrist / independent-y type voter ever mention that. Ever. Not once. For a reason to like not vote for Kamala. So continuing. Party officials described the draft document as focusing on the 2024 election as a whole, but not the presidential campaign, which is something like eating at a steakhouse and then reviewing the salad. And yeah, that's correct. The journalist there makes that joke. That's insane. You're going to look at the 2024 election as a whole, which means they're going to consider like congressional losses, congressional wins, blah, blah, blah. Folks, this is America. The presidential election is completely undergirding all the rest of the elections that are happening around. It's called down ballot, down ballot visibility, right? So like if in the general election, if no one's excited to vote for the president of your party, that creates depressed turnout for everybody else down ballot, whether it's like, U.S. Senate election, state house election, all that. Like that is super depressing. So that's insane to again be like, yeah, we're not looking at the presidential. Makes zero sense. So continuing on, producing a tough-minded public review of national electoral defeat would be a politically delicate exercise under any circumstance, given the need to find fault with the work and judgment of important party leaders and strategists. It is particularly fraught for the new DNC chairman, Ken Martin, who promised a post-election review from his first day on the job, but whose first few months in the role have been plagued by infighting and financial strains. We are not interested, quote, we are not interested in second guessing campaign tactics or decisions of campaign operatives, said Jane Kleeb, the Democratic chairwoman of Nebraska, who heads the Association of Democratic State Chairs and is a close ally of Mr. Martin. Quote, we are interested in what voters turned out for Republicans and Democrats and how we can fix this moving forward. Locked out of power at the federal level, Democrats are struggling to show that they have taken to heart the message that voters sent in November and are well suited to regain power in future elections. The review, which was begun in March and is being led by Paul Rivera, a veteran Democrat operative, is not yet complete and the report is not fully drafted. Mr. Rivera, nonetheless, has begun briefing people on what the report has found so far, and those briefings suggest that the Democratic autopsy will avoid addressing some of the likeliest or leading causes of death. Among those is whether Mr. Biden should have run for re-election. Insane. Some of Miss Harris's top aides have faulted him for dropping out so late that she had just 107 days to campaign as the presidential nominee. But Mr. Biden's son Hunter said on a podcast this week that Democrats lost, quote, because we did not remain loyal to his father. And yeah, I mean, that's madness. There was nothing to remain loyal to. Your dad's brain was melting on live television every single time we saw him for 3 months preceding the ballot box being entered by voters. So yeah, of course, what loyalty was there to be had? You basically were saying on that podcast, again, you expected the entire party to just hitch themselves to a sinking ship. Like, no, everybody jumped off. The entire deck was underwater already. Like, it was toast. It was over. What could you expect there? Just madness, man. So continuing, top Democrats said they did not intend for the report to address strategic decisions made by leaders of the Biden and Harris campaigns. Indeed, a sign of the report's narrow scope, more than a half dozen people who were senior officials on the campaign say they have not yet been interviewed. DNC officials cautioned that interviews were still taking place and the report's conclusions might change before it's released this fall. We're glad to see there's so much interest in the action report on how Democrats can win again, Mr. Rivera said. But folks might be better off holding their applause or their criticism until we've had a chance to complete our work and people can actually read it. People briefed on the report's progress said they'd been told it would focus more on outside groups and super PACs that spent hundreds of millions of dollars aiding the Biden and Harris campaigns through advertising, voter registration drives, and turnout efforts. Mrs. Kleeb said she expected the report to accelerate the party's diversion of resources from advertising to organizing. So let's stop right there. So right here, this part, people briefed on the report had been told it would focus more on outside groups and super PACs that spent hundreds of millions of dollars. So if you remember, if I'm not mistaken, this was the most money ever spent in a presidential campaign, like by far. I forget how much it outpaced the previous election, but it was a ton of money. So like, to be fair, like, yeah, there's some meaningful analysis to be done. Like, hey, how did we spend this money? Was that smart? I'm not saying don't do that. Like, of course, but they're like saying like, this is, this is what it's going to focus on. Like outside groups and super PACs and how they spent their money. That's insane. So remember, the main reason that they're talking about this is two reasons. Super PACs aren't allowed to have contact with the person that they're running ads for, right? That's the little fake separation. It's like the final part, the final leg of what Citizens United didn't absolutely destroy, where the super PACs are allowed to take unlimited amount of political campaign donations, and then basically the deal on that end with it all is that, like, all right, hey, the campaign can't coordinate that money. It's basically just like kayfabe. It's like a fake little veil of separation between some billionaire just being able to just hand Donald Trump $500 million for a presidential campaign. So, but yeah, I mean, think about it, folks. Like, this is basically like, say there was a corporation that it was a startup. It had $250 million of seed money, right? And over the course of like 6 months, it went belly up. It failed at its outset or whatever, and then they had to sell like another 18 months after that because the project failed, right? Whatever product they were trying to launch didn't work out. So if the group that funded it, right, if there was like like a venture capitalist group or something that funded it, if they sat there and said like, hey, we're only going to look at like how the money was spent. We're not going to actually talk to the CEO or the CFO or any of the people who actually ran anything, right? That would be insane to us. And, you know, of course, like I'm of the opinion that like, yeah, I don't want the government to work like a company, like a corporation, but this isn't a government we're talking about. We're talking about a political campaign. The political campaigns that these people, right, all of these DC strategists, you know, a huge amount of the money that moves around the Democratic Party is all people that are like basically paid contractors to come in and run a campaign like a business. That's a huge swath of what the money spent is. That's the purpose, right? It's advertising and marketing. That's what you're doing. You're trying to spend money in the most efficient way possible to make the maximum amount of people think positively about the person you're running the campaign for. And then adversely, you know, or conversely, I should say, spending money to run negative ads about the person that your candidate is running against to try to maximize the, you know, disapproval among the electorate of your campaign, the person who you're running the campaign for their opponent, right? So I'm not, doesn't make any sense. This is insane. Again, it's crazy that Hunter is literally the only person that isn't a strategist that has, you know, can actually profit from doing this type of an autopsy on television. The only one that was on the inside track or is an actual, you know, moneyed interest, like these super PACs or the people who are actually being paid to conduct the audit right now, basically saying like, hey, we're only going to look into, you know, like how we spend money on ad spend. Insane. So continuing on, the days of us spending millions and millions of dollars on traditional TV ads are over. That should have ended like after 2016. If Hillary Clinton's loss didn't prove that to you, that like, hey, spending $500 million on TV ads is literally lighting money on fire, then I mean, and the crazy part is like the party did talk about that. So if that's like some of the most meaningful analysis these people have at their preliminary parts of the investigation, the autopsy, I should say, then it's okay. You're relearning the thing we learned and we knew already. Cool. Continuing, in particular, the people briefed on it said the after-action review is expected to place blame with Future Forward, the party's main super PAC, which spent $560 million to support Mr. Biden and then Ms. Harris. They said the report would argue that Future Forward spent far too much propping up Ms. Harris and not nearly enough attacking Mr. Trump. That is probably true, right? So like I said, not all of this is like, oh, I'm poo-pooing and it's meaningless. That's definitely true. There were barely any negative ads on Trump, and even the ones that they did run were basically on like benign, you know, scandalous things that the party had already launched against him. I mean, they literally impeached him. Like, let's not forget, a lot of it was they were just trying to kind of retread a lot of the same stuff. It wasn't, you know, actually hitting him on policy. But the reason that they couldn't do that, and this is why this autopsy is meaningless if they don't actually look at it holistically, the reason that negative ads couldn't be run on Trump, like policy wise, was because mainly Kamala Harris had nothing. She wasn't really running on anything, right? Don't forget, like her own voters were basically saying like, hey, we want to see you meaningfully break with Biden's policy on Gaza. That was like the hottest thing happening at the time. Oh, fucking genocide. Let's not forget. She had nothing. She was offering nothing. She was still talking in the same terms of like, oh, our vision, our goals as a party, our, you know, our values, all that nonsense. And then meanwhile, the reason that you couldn't really run super negative on Trump for policy was because the Heritage Foundation had released Project 2025. So, you know, that basically like created enough insulation where Trump could just do, you know, his lie about everything a million times a minute act on TV every time he was asked about it, where he was like, oh, I don't even know what this is. What is this? What are we talking about? Because he didn't actually write it himself. But fast forward now, you know, 4 months in, we're seeing that he's literally following that to a T. There's been a ton of coverage of that. Go look it up. He's following that Heritage Foundation to the sentence. Continuing on. It is expected to argue that Future Forward's advertising approach was too focused on television programs to be effective, and it will review the lack of coordination between the super PAC's advertising and the Harris campaigns, which were not often in sync. Yeah, it's, you know, kind of hard to be when you can't communicate, allegedly. A Future Forward document was distributed to donors and reviewed by the New York Times it said that about half of the super PAC's advertising was delivered on digital platforms, which includes television-like streaming services. The group said it spent more than $51 million just on YouTube ads. A Future Forward aide who insisted on anonymity to discuss the group's operations said just 13% of its advertising was positive about Miss Harris, with the rest attacking Trump. And again, most of this continues on. We're gonna end this article, this reading series, on that point right there. But I just wanted to highlight it because, you know, they even say it right here, like whoever that aide is that said it anonymously. I don't know why they didn't quote them, even though they're anonymous. But yeah, they're saying like only 13% of the advertising was positive about Kamala Harris. And, you know, the reason is like, what positive ads were there really to run other than like, again, I'm not him. I'm not Trump. Same shit Hillary did. Ooh, this is fascism versus democracy. Same shit Hillary did. There was nothing new that she offered. She literally had almost no policy platform. It was just like, hey, if you like how we recovered from COVID, I was a part of that. I'm on the winning team. Vote for us again. Completely disregarding the fact that, you know, whatever little bit of capture you did have amongst your actual Democratic Party voters, there was still the huge specter of the Gazan genocide hanging over your head. And it was never addressed. And independents sensed and saw that too. And people weren't super sold on the economy. Don't forget, inflation was pretty bad. Like, we'd recovered somewhat, but like the kitchen table issue stuff, she said nothing to any of that. So, of course, yeah, like that makes perfect sense. 13% of the advertising was positive about Harris. There wasn't much to offer. And then you're attacking Trump again, like I said, on mostly retreaded issues that, you know, you weren't saying anything new. There was nothing exciting. There was no energy. And to be fair to Kamala, you know, Biden swept all the energy under the rug by staying in way too fucking long. So, yeah, that's it. There's my post-mortem of the 2024 election. As always, thanks everybody for tuning in. I'm gonna try to keep going on the weekly pace here. We'll see, as long as Trump doesn't make the news cycle too insane or difficult to keep up with. I will keep that pace. All right. This is also, I'm going to upload last week's episode to YouTube. So don't forget, check the Foreign and Domestic YouTube page, subscribe, like and share. It'll be up on Facebook and Spotify. I'm going to be back up on Apple Music soon. I have to find a way now that Spotify did with Anchor. I have no way to upload that without doing it directly. So I have to figure that out. But yeah, if you search it up pretty much anywhere, it should pop up everywhere except Apple Podcasts. All right, folks. Thanks for listening. Thanks for having me. And yeah, keep doing that analysis.